Hey there guys, NexGenStriker here, your favorite YouTube ranter, and today I'm going to talk about a topic that's very relevant and it's been around for a long time, and I figured I'd give my 2 cents on it. So the topic came from a blog TV from one of my good YouTubing friends, NeoGameSpark. You know, I was watching his, I commented on it, me and him kind of talked about it a little bit. Well, he gave his thoughts, I gave a comment. And so yeah, I figured, why not do a video on it? So what it's about is, how back in the day, before YouTube was around, people, whenever something would come out like a movie or a video game, professional people like, say, IGN for example, who are still around, they would go and review it, and the people would look at their reviews and say, oh, okay, that's worth looking into. I'll go buy a ticket, or I'll go buy the game, or rent it, or whatever. But now, since YouTube came out, people thought, oh, why not give my 2 cents on it? And it became very popular, and to this day, people still do it. Hey, I've even done it every now and then. So, what's the problem with that? Well, some people are a little bit too biased. And bias is a bad thing, especially when you're reviewing something. Now, take a minute with me and think about, just some various things. There's very different reviewers on YouTube. First you've got, people that review manga and books and chapters. Then you've got people that review movies, people who review games, and it just goes on forever. Now maybe I haven't been around the YouTubing circle long enough, but it seems the problem here mainly is the people who review books and chapters. That seems to be the primal cause. Maybe because it just seems like they're the most ignorant at times, Example, okay, you guys know I'm into Naruto. Well, I used to be a lot more into it than I am now. That's a different topic. Anyway, so, of course, I'll watch people who review things. I do it all the time. I watch people who review movies, games. That's why I'm talking about this. And, there are a lot of people who review that kind of stuff. Especially Shonen Jump material, Japanese anime, manga. People review that like crazy, and they are very popular. But it seems like some of the most popular are often the most corrupt, if you will. An example would be, say, a chapter comes out, okay? And the chapter, you read it, of course you read it before they review it, and you think about it and you're like, that chapter kind of sucked. And then you click on their video and they're like, oh man, that was an amazing chapter. Great character development, even though one character was in it doing anything. Oh man, great story, even though there was no story. Oh man, the flashbacks were intense, even though the flashbacks sucked. And it just goes on and on. I could do this all day, but really you guys kind of understand what I'm already going at. But the thing is, why do they do this? What do you really gain out of doing it? Now, I've kind of got a theory, work with me here. The reason I think that people do this is because they're afraid of the criticism they'll get from the hardcore fans, because it seems like a majority of them, they do this. They support them for being extremely biased towards said material. And that really sucks because people really need to just, use their brains for once. Even though you like a series or you like a material and you watch an episode or you read a chapter and it sucks, you have to admit that it sucks. I mean, there are things that I like, and there's some things that, that pop out from that, like a video game series, for example. Let's say, what's a good example? Okay, Dragon Ball Z, okay? I'm sure a lot of you played Dragon Ball Z fighting games in the past, since most of us my age grew up on Dragon Ball Z, so we played the video games. Well, there were a lot of bad ones. Now, let's say that I was reviewing Dragon Ball Z Sagas. Now, if I went out and gave it a perfect 10, would you honestly believe me? Would you honestly support me? Well, I would hope not, because that game was not a 10, okay? And that's the point. Not everything is perfect. You have to critique it, and the main thing is you're a reviewer. People look up to you and think, man, he really is true. You sway people's opinions. And you have so much power in your hands, you can't just go around and say, it was great, go buy it. You have to critique it. You have to be at least somewhat professional. I mean, YouTube doesn't have any standards really, unless you're really, really high up there making money. Then you really need to think, oh, well, I better be professional now. But it doesn't have that many standards, but still, you should set yourself to at least a few. So I guess another one would be the nostalgic review. And these are typically more of people who review movies and old TV series that they grew up with, okay? And even though they suck, they'll look back at it and be like, well, I liked it back then, and I still have a warm place for it now, so I like it. That's not how it works with reviewing, okay? Now let me bring up an example again. You know, not to be a hypocrite, let me give you an example. Okay, when I was little, I watched Power Rangers all the time. I lived Power Rangers, okay? Loved it to death. I watched like, I don't know how many of those series because they popped out like all the time. And you know, one day came on TV when I was a lot older, I think 16, 17, and I was like, oh really, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, okay, that was the first one, I'll go watch it. You know, heard that rock theme, I was like, oh man, this is going to be so cool. And then I started watching, I'm like, why did I ever like this garbage? You know, because the acting is bad in that show, and it just goes to show that not everything that's nostalgic is necessarily good. And you know, even if you're a viewer and you think that it's, like, you know it's bad, but it's a guilty pleasure, you should go out and say, this is a guilty pleasure. I like it, but you won't like it. Now, there are some reviewers who do this, like a good example, Jeremy Johns, go watch him. He does excellent reviews of movies and games. He will say, you know, like, even if he enjoys it, but he knows it's bad, he'll be like, well, here's my ranking if it were me, here's my ranking to you. Because he's honest, he's a good reviewer. Now, some people will go and look at something and be like, well, I like it, it's good. End of story. It doesn't work that way, you know. And going back into TV shows, this isn't really nostalgic, but more or less with maybe animated series, for example, people will watch these, and Japan is a big one for this because the animation in those series typically aren't as good as American animation, because American animation is typically more, you know, it's consistent. It's never irregular like I've seen some Japanese anime, for example, and people will go and look at that and be like, oh, that episode was amazing, that episode was amazing, every episode is amazing. Is there never a bad episode to you people? I mean, the animation was crap, it wasn't very exciting, it was slow, they just drug it out to make more money, and you guys still give it this? You know, I don't really understand the mentality of reviewers, to be quite honest. The people who are hypocritical, more reviewers, and you know, the people who just suck. And the only reason they get a lot of views is because they're extreme fanboys and the little thumbnails because they're partners. You know, so I just wanted to, you know, raise awareness of this, and I hope that I don't ever become like that. You know, if I do, make sure to be like, hey, go watch that video. You're a hypocrite. And I'll be like, oh, okay. But, you know, that was just my little thoughts on the whole, you know, the ranting situation on YouTube. Well, the review, not the ranting. Really, with video games, I don't see it as much, but again, it does happen, I'm sure it does, you know, maybe I just only watch the higher up people and I don't see it as much, but you know, with certain games, people are going to have biases towards them, and you know, a little bias isn't necessarily bad because we're all prone to be biased, but there's a limit. And, you know, you have to be able to understand that and take that in consideration while reviewing. And that's all I had to say, guys. I hope you guys liked that kind of rant. I wasn't too angry, but I was just kind of throwing out the facts. Anyway, do this if you like it. And if you don't, tell me down below. Maybe give some examples. I wasn't going to go out and say any, but I do know some that would definitely be pissed off if they figured out I was making this. And you guys probably know a few that do. So, you can tell them below. I don't care. But anyway, catch you guys later.